वाले हैं इसराइल हमास वॉर के बारे में और भारत के जो स्पेसिफिक इश्यूज हैं उसके बारे में बात करेंगे। और इन चीजों को डिस्कस करने के लिए हमारे साथ हैं जनरल अता हसनैन। सबसे पहले मैं उनको वेलकम करना चाहता हूं। सर, गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉट।
Jen, good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me for this program.
राइट। इससे पहले कि मैं ये प्रोग्राम शुरू करूं, मैं बताना चाहता हूं General Atta Hassan is very famous. He comes on TV, he comes on lot of channels and all that. This is the first time he's coming to Gunner Shot. First and foremost, thank you, sir, for making it feasible to come here. The second thing मैं जो बताना चाहता हूँ कि General Hassan and I have a long relationship. And if I put all the relationship in one word, he was my boss. When I was a GOC, he was my co-commander. And very few people know he is one of the few generals who's commanded 2 corps, a strike corps in the deserts and 15 corps in J&K. And of course, these days he is in NDMA. And so before I even start this, the way things are going and the earthquakes are coming and all that, sooner or later we should start a series on disaster.
This is something I assure all the viewers of Gunner's Shot. This is something which we will focus on a lot.
Right, sir. Before I start before we set the stage for today's discussion, I'll give a heads up on what's happened so far. Okay, a quick review of the situation, if you may, so that we are on one page. जैसे आपको पता है, इससे पहले हमने 5 एपिसोड कर लिया है ऑन द इजराइल हमास वॉर। ये 6th एपिसोड है। अगला एपिसोड परसों और अगले दिन है, बाद में आऊंगा। अगर आप बाएं के मैप देखेंगे, गाजा स्ट्रिप साफ नजर आ रहा है। सबसे पहले इजराइल ने ये जो पिंक कलर में जो है वो इलाका एवैक्यूएट कर दिया। और उसके बाद आप राइट वाले मैप में देखेंगे तो उन्होंने हुक्म दे दिया या जारी कर दिया, ऐलान कर दिया कि जितने भी गाजा पट्टी में हैं वो साउथ की तरफ चले जाएंगे so that they can start their operations. और उन्होंने ये एरिया ऑफ एवैक्यूएशन बड़ा क्लियरली बता दिया। और एक वादी गाजा है, उसके नीचे they said they'll go so that they can start evacuating their operations, ground operations against Hamas. और ये they have been carrying out strikes. ये राइट वाले मैप में देखेंगे तो द स्ट्राइक्स जहां जहां इन्होंने स्ट्राइक किया है वो दर्शाया गया है। वही क्या है कि ये लेफ्ट वाले मैप वो पिक्चर में इज अ सैटेलाइट फोटोग्राफ। अगर आप देखेंगे तो ज्यादातर वो नॉर्थ की तरफ स्ट्राइक्स हो रहे हैं। ओके, इसके बाद इजराइल ने बता दिया कि वो 3 तरीके से वो हमला करेंगे। वो 3 फ्रंट्स जो वो बोल रहे हैं न्यूज क्लिप में, इट इज बाय एयर, सी एंड लैंड. It is not 3 different directions. That is what has been clarified in other media channels also. But New York Times has said very clearly Israeli invasion plans to target Gaza city and Hamas leadership. So very specific, 2-pronged attack into the city and focusing on the leadership and by air, land and sea. इसके साथ साथ जैसे ये चलता आया है, Israel has warned of consequences if bombing of Gaza is not stopped. They said they'll do what they have to do. उन्होंने एक अर्थक्वेक के बारे में बात किया है। ओके, साथ साथ हिजबुल्ला के साथ नॉर्थ में, ये यहाँ जो देख रहे हो, नॉर्थ में हिजबुल्ला जो लेबनान के अंदर डिप्लॉयड है एंड इट इज देयर इन दिस थिंग। वहां देयर हैज बीन एक्सचेंज ऑफ फायर एंड 1 Israeli soldier has been killed. So there's a slight glimmer of a second front opening up also. The threat is there. We don't know whether it will come up or not. Then, of course, Russia has gone to the Security Council and they've asked for a vote on Israel and Gaza. But then that's very funny because when their thing came for Ukraine, they resisted everything. Okay. So the interesting thing जो development आज हुआ है वो है China. China feels now that Israel has gone beyond self-defense and they've said stop collective punishment of this whole thing. They feel that the evacuation of Gaza, the northern part of Gaza, is a collective punishment. And side by side, US has sent a second aircraft carrier. One. Side by side, US has sent a second carrier into the area. So now there are two carriers as a deterrent uh, for anyone interfering in this entire action. Right? Now, with this, these are the issues, sir, which we need to discuss. Where do you see this conflict going? Is there a larger West Asia configuration? There's some dichotomy which appears in the India stand, though it has been clarified. I think we need a discussion on that. What is India's role in this conflict resolution? Because I personally feel we have a large role to play. Will Pakistan and its terror factory get inspired by Hamas and try something on us? And something about we have to reflect on surprise, deception, and intelligence. And last but not the least, once again, India has evacuated all its citizens from there through Op Vijay. This is after Ukraine, we've done it again. And before that, also, we did it from Wuhan and many other places, which is something, which is a great capability which we have developed, which we need to discuss. So with this, I would request you to see, address the larger issues where this conflict is going, and how does West Asia get affected majorly.
Thank you. That's an excellent background that you have just given. We are on the 7th to 8th day of the war, which is coming about. By now, one would have expected that there would be an incursion into Gaza. It's not happened, obviously, because mobilization has also taken time. 300,000 strength to mobilize is not easy, although the IDF is known to be very, very efficient in mobilization. But then you have to get your tanks together. You've got to marry up your teams together. Lots of people are living in different parts of Israel. They've all got to come together. That's a huge challenge. Now, the kind of brutality and the kind of activity which Hamas carried out, to expect that the international community will step in immediately and put an end to any responses, any retribution, etc., may be unrealistic. I think the IDF will be permitted to carry out this. The only thing, it's a very, very difficult thing to avoid civilian casualties. तो इसलिए जो अच्छा इन्होंने मेजर लिया है वो है कि नॉर्दर्न गाजा को खाली कर दो. It may pose a huge humanitarian problem. There's no doubt. You may own millions and billions of dollars and have properties and this and that, but everyone, the moment you leave your houses, everyone is a common citizen, has just pushed out into the southern areas. International aid agencies have not yet, UN agencies have not really come into relevance till now. They haven't taken over the humanitarian problems so far. So this is a festering issue. IDF has to cater for the humanitarian side. In today's modern conflict, you can be pressurized hugely if you only look at retribution without looking at the effects of that. देखिए, ये हमें याद रखना चाहिए, यूक्रेन के अंदर भी यही चीज थी. ये जो हम इसको अगर शुरुआत करें तो 1919 से इसकी शुरुआत कर सकते हैं, ट्रीटी ऑफ वर्साइल से, कि आप जब रेट्रीब्यूशन देखते हैं, when you go in for punishment of your adversary for having carried out a certain activity, you have to know the limits to which you can go. You try and take it to the last in terms of retribution, you can go horribly wrong. You can only enhance the conflict, you can spread the conflict, and you can take the conflict far beyond into a couple of more generations. So this is something that the IDF has to be very careful of. There are some very sensible commanders there. I've met many Israeli commanders. And I can tell you, conflict management, conflict termination, unse zyada kisi ko malum hi nahi hai. But they are going to be under immense pressure internally. Because Hamas has called it upon itself. The kind of tactics it has used, the strategy, let's not forget about tactics, the kind of strategy it has used by borrowing from the book of the ISIS and thinking that this can be converted into a conventional war, something like what happened at Mosul. 4 saal tak, if you remember, ISIS could continue holding out these great centers, impose tax and things like that, and virtually live independent. This is what the Hamas probably was imagining that it can do. It doesn't realize that the moment you have done acts of this nature, the whole international community is against you. And Israel, against whom you perpetrated it, is a nation which may have been taken by surprise, but will come back all guns blazing. So it's an issue which is going to fester for fairly long. I don't see a ceasefire coming about and things like that in the very near future. It may go on. The hot pursuit part of it may go on for the better part of next 7, 8, 9, 10 days based upon the humanitarian situation. At some stage, the international community, led by the United States, the big powers, is going to step in. You've seen China, you've seen Russia already making noises about it, are going to step in and pressurize Israel to put an end to it. Now, by that time, what amount of objectives would Israel have achieved is anybody's guess. I find it very difficult to think that they would have achieved of their objectives. If their objectives is the total elimination of Hamas, I doubt that they can achieve it in that kind of a period. It will probably once again come down to the same kind of things which have been happening in this region for very, very long. I do not foresee the entire population of Gaza being evacuated. Ultimately, if that population has to evacuate, it will come into enclaves within Israel. Forced movement with casualties or whatever into enclaves in Israel itself. The humanitarian agencies would establish camps for them. These camps would once again have the Hamas entering into them. And you are going to come back to the same square one from where you have started the Gaza conflict. So you see, at the moment, you can contemplate many contingencies which can take place over the next few couple of weeks. Only the last word on it, Hezbollah. Hezbollah is making noises basically to act relevant. They also want to show their relevance in these times. Perhaps at the behest of their sponsors, they are also firing off a shot here and there just to keep the Israelis. The Israelis cannot forget 2006. जो 2006 में हुआ, जो हिजबुल्लाह के साथ लड़ाई हुई थी, उसको नहीं भूल सकते हैं वो. They have to keep a major part of the idea available for that. They are looking at Golan Heights also. Syria के साथ उन्होंने a couple of missiles have been fired at Damascus and some other sites inside Syria. Aleppo to send a message very clearly to Syria not to step in. These are all testing the waters which are going on at the same time. तो ये अभी कोई इंडिकेटर नहीं है जिससे कि हम समझ सकते हैं कि ये ज्यादा बड़ी लड़ाई हो जाएगी. नहीं, there are no other Arab nations of that kind. इजिप्ट के साथ नहीं हो सकता. मुश्किल ही लगता है कभी इजिप्ट के साथ होगा. Egypt is on a different ball game completely. Syria, Lebanon में हिजबुल्लाह के साथ, yes, these are potential conflagrants, मगर अभी भी जरा कम संभावना लगती है इनके साथ कुछ होने की. Jordan, no, nothing on the Jordan side. West Bank के ऊपर मुश्किल है कुछ ऐसी चीज होना. ईरान के साथ होना, because exchange जब border नहीं है common, तो जरा chances ज्यादा कम है. Can you expect a larger exchange of missilery against each other, special forces, air activities against each other? ये भी मुश्किल ही लगता है कि इस तरह का होगा. So these are the broad essentials at the moment, the way I'm looking at it.
Right, sir. Now, आपने ये बहुत अच्छी तरीके से देख लिया कि how this whole thing will pan out, say for the next 1 week, 10 days, 15 days. But इसके साथ साथ there'll be a certain amount of issues which will come up in the West Asian politics. There are already problems between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and that deal is actually tenuous. That everyone is jockeying for power there, whether it's Turkey or Iran or Saudi Arabia, all want to be the kingpin of West Asia, right? And American hold over this area has reduced over the past 1-2 years, and with rising competition from Russia and China, because they also become big players. Actually, अगर आप देखेंगे तो ये West Asia जो है ना, it's become a cauldron, and it is a tenuous cauldron. और उसके ऊपर ये Hamas और Israel का problem होगा. So don't you think that whole thing will come back into this place, and this will become the center of conflict in the world today? I mean, in the foreseeable future.
Intention, देखिए जनशंकर, intention हमास का यही था. उनको ये डर था कि हम irrelevant हो गए. ये अब्राहम अकॉर्ड जो चल रहा था, जिसमें कि यूएई, मोरक्को, ऐसे सब देशों के साथ जो टेस्टिंग ऑफ द वाटर्स चल रहा था, इसमें ये समझ थी ब्रॉडली इन पैलेस्टीनियन एलिमेंट्स की कि अगर इन सब के बीच में समझौता हो गया, ईरान और सऊदी अरेबिया के बीच में भी समझौता हो गया, तो हम कहां के रहे. ये जिस हमारे ऊपर ही तो ये पूरी लड़ाइयां लड़ी गई हैं, and on us, and ultimately we are the forgotten entity. This is the prime thinking of the Hamas. The intention was, and I love, sort of going back to the parallel of the 1973 war, because
Yeah.
this is exactly what Anwar Sadat said. Anwar Sadat said, we are becoming irrelevant in this whole conflict. The whole world is going past, and now nothing is happening. They are forgetting the Israeli incursions into all these areas, the occupied territories of the Sinai Desert and things like that. और वहीं से उन्होंने वो शरारा शुरू किया, 10 kilometers inside, surprise and deception. Suez Canal के चार उतर गए, मगर did not cross the 10-kilometer limit. Only the idea was to spark शरारा, कि इनको दुनिया को समझाओ कि put back your attention here, तवज्जो अपनी यहाँ वापस लाओ. This seems to be the intent of the Hamas, but the Hamas seems to have gone horribly wrong in this. You see, the sense that Sadat had was balance. कि आगे यहां तक जाओ, इसको इस्तेमाल करो, मिलिट्री टारगेट्स के साथ करो, कोई कैजुअलिटीज, सिविलियन कैजुअलिटीज तो हुई नहीं थी कहीं. ये जो है, they have looked at brutality, and this ISIS idea has entered into their, as a harebrained thought into their minds, and they thought that they can convert this into a military victory.
Yeah.
Right? What has happened? What has happened is all the Arab nations are very cautious at the moment. Now, it's an emerging environment ever since COVID, ever since the pandemic. This thing has been moving, as we are all aware. We in India were worried that the Chinese have intervened and found some kind of a treaty between a peace initiative between Iran and Saudi Arabia. I was shocked when I saw this. I said, where are we in India? I mean, who understands this better than we in India? Why didn't we take the initiative? Then I realized, China, इनको समझ नहीं है इसकी. They think that they can end December 2022 में शुरुआत की और मार्च तक ट्रीटी साइन कर दी. अरे ये कॉन्फ्लिक्ट मिडिल ईस्ट की हजारों साल पुरानी कॉन्फ्लिक्ट है. इसकी ये शिया सुन्नी जो डिवाइड है, ये हजारों साल का डिवाइड है. इसको चाइनीज जो है ना 3 हफ्ते 6 हफ्ते के अंदर जो है रद्द नहीं कर सकते. This is the broader understanding you have got to remember. Civilizational, ideological wars of this kind take time. And just to boast to the world, you see, we entered and in 6 weeks sorted it out. You see now what has happened. The Chinese are now making all kinds of awkward noises. But the tenuous peace between Iran and Saudi Arabia is already on the brink. हालांकि मैं नहीं कहता हूं कि टूटने वाली है, but it's already on the brink. And the idea of Hamas was this, कि सऊदी इजराइल जो वो चल रहा है, नेगोशिएशन नहीं, पीस पार्लीज चल रही है, इनको रद्द करो somehow. The moment we do things like this, there will be a requirement from the Arabs to come together. Pan-Arabism hoga, Pan-Islamism hoga, 57 countries of the OIC will come together and things like that. The moment all this happens, ये सब हट जाएगा. To the extent that even Abraham Accord शायद हट जाएंगे. But I think things in the Middle East have gone up to an extent, and everyone realizes that the spoiler in this entire game in West Asia is Hamas. You see, I wish किसी वक्त इन्होंने महमूद अब्बास को, पैलेस्टीनियन अथॉरिटी को, ठीक है, फतह को कभी कुछ सिग्निफिकेंस दिए होती and allowed them to be propped up. This is where Netanyahu is being hugely criticized. The management of conflict. The management of conflict demanded this aspect. कि अगर ऐसी एंटिटी हमास जैसी एंटिटी है तो इसको काउंटर करने के लिए you've got something else with you, prop them up strongly. But this attempt was never really made. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, sir, today I was listening to this chap, Farid Zakaria. He was saying that, Netanyahu at some point of time, gave a little room for Hamas to flourish, to actually counter the Palestinian Authority
Exactly.
and Fatah.
Exactly. I fully agree with you. Allowed Qatar, this is the thing which is going around, is allowed Qatar's $1 billion to be to travel into Gaza, into the hands of Hamas, obviously, to allowed all those weaponry to come in from Afghanistan and things like that. I don't know. I mean, everyone knew that Mahmoud Abbas, Fatah's tradition. We know India's relationship with Fatah.
Fatah.
Yasser Arafat used to come here
Yeah,
and
yeah.
treated as a state guest in India, right? So everyone knew this. I would, to a great extent, blame the United States also for this. They knew it, right? They are the ones who brought Fatah out of everything else. They are the ones who took Fatah to Camp David, along with all with the Egyptians and the Israeli leadership, etc. They are the ones who got him the Nobel Prize, if I remember correctly. So, if all this was done, then Fatah should have been the one which should have been sort of put up rather than Hamas.
Yeah. Okay.
But Netanyahu and his so-called super right-wingers of Israel at that particular time ensured that all this work which was done in the past was undone under Netanyahu.
Yeah. So actually, you made a very important point. A lot of why Hamas has grown to this level. The root cause at some root, one root at least comes into Israel. It is their own doing. It's a political, let's say. The second thing, sir, I would like you to think of it. I don't know. This is my view, which I have. Hamas might have tried these multi-entry points and attacks and all that. I don't think they imagine that the kind of success they'll get. And probably because of being a indisciplined force to a large extent, and they went on revenge and overdid it, and they've landed themselves in a problem. Now they don't also know what to do further. I mean, do you think this has some value in what I'm saying?
This is an interesting observation. I have been thinking about this. It's been an interesting observation when your own success gets the better of you. You don't imagine your success. You think you're only going up to a limited point, but you see after that success lies in front of you. You exploit beyond and get yourself into a huge tangle. I think something like that has happened here. Perhaps at the planning level of the strategic of the leadership of Hamas, they did probably try to restrict themselves to a 3-kilometer, 5-kilometer limit of incursions into Israel and looking for hostages. And they were, as we are aware, there are enough of the villages and townships around. They have entered into them, spent the better part of 2 hours, 3 hours looking for hostages, got the hostages out and brought them. Now, in this process, a lot of things got perhaps decentralized down to the tactical and the sub-tactical levels. Now, essentially, Hamas is a terrorist organization.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
The moment you decentralize this into the hands of the tactical and sub-tactical level, it only deteriorates into terrorist actions. Imagination that the Hamas leadership probably had that using terrorists as fighters and employing them in virtual conventional operations will be successful. I think that came apart completely.
Yeah, I think so fully, sir. I think we've clarified it, but how this will play out, aage waqt batayega. So the second thing which I want to pick up from what you said, we used to treat Arafat like a state guest. In fact, I've seen long back in the non-aligned meet, Arafat and Mrs. Indira Gandhi, actually giving a hug to each other and all that. And we have tremendous equations with the, Fatah and the, Palestinian Authority and all that. Now, in this kind of a scenario, our Prime Minister has given a clear statement that we are against the terror, we are with Israel, right? Simultaneously, we have this equation with the Palestinians, right? And this, I thought many people didn't understand our ability to differentiate between the terrorist part of it and our relationship with Palestine. Could you please explain it?
Thank you very much. That's a very appropriate thing for me to explain. I've been explaining this for the better part of the last 2 days to a lot of people who have been questioning it. What the Prime Minister did was right at the beginning. He was one of the first people to respond and he tweeted through Twitter. The Prime Minister, the last person who will do it without any reference to his own ministry. I'm sure it was a part of approved plans, the way the Prime Minister likes to play it. He contextualized, and that's the word for it. He contextualized the situation. It was terror that he was targeting. He targeted terror. Why? India in 1996 moved a resolution for defining terrorism.
Defining terror, yeah.
27 years, no one has defined a terror. And this is one of the major reasons we are pointing out from New Delhi that, see, if you're not defining terrorism is what is leading to this kind of a thing. Now, terrorism is, you go into the gray zone between conventional and unconventional or irregular. That is what is happening. Secondly, we are the oldest sufferers of terror. We have been complaining from ages. Rajiv Gandhi's time that we took this whole issue to terror to the United Nations. So what the Prime Minister did was use the legacy knowledge and put this together into context of what has happened with Israel this time. And I think came out the winner on this. Suddenly, unfortunately, a lot of people said, but this is not India's stance. India is not pro-Israel completely. India is pro-Palestine. Legacy, we've always been pro-Palestine. Not realizing we've been pro-nothing. We've been one of the most balanced approaches that India has followed all along. Ever since 1992, when the relationship with Israel opened out, I think we have followed a very balanced policy. We have never, ever, we have voted against Israel in so many times. We have held back our vote so many times, abstained from voting on occasions in support of the Palestinian Authority. So I think from time to time, we have nuanced it very well. And what is important is to remember is we have supported what is called the two-state theory. That the Palestinians have a right to exist as a state and the Israelis have a right to exist as a state. It is for the international community to come together and ensure that both the states can live with each other.
Yeah. In fact, sir, just to highlight, this is the statement which has been put out by the Foreign Ministry, right? Where he says our policy in this regard has been long-standing and consistent, just exactly what you said, right? India has always advocated the resumption of direct negotiations toward establishing a sovereign, independent, and viable state of Palestine.
Absolutely.
Living within the secure and recognized borders side by side at peace with Israel. That's just two-state theory which you just mentioned.
Absolutely, exactly.
And he added there's a universal obligation to observe international humanitarian law. There is also a global responsibility to fight the menace of terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. The last two lines I thought
very well. Very well put. Very well put.
Well, so now with this kind of a thing, sir, our civilizational equations with this area, after all we have, don't you think we have a huge role to play in conflict resolution and getting things to safe shores in this areas?
No doubt we have a civilizational role here. We can go back to the 7th century when you found even an army of people who had gone to fight on behalf of Imam Hussein as when the Battle of Karbala. It's a very, very famous, it's as long as that back as that we can draw our linkages to each other. There have been the Arab traders, there's been the movement of Islam through Persia into India, etc. So our linkages are huge completely. But I want to draw a reference to the year 2018, which I feel is a very important year. And some people may have forgotten it. Of course, everyone has been observing it, but just to put it into context, it is the year in which on 26th of January, if you remember, we had 10 members of the ASEAN as chief guests at the Republic Day. 10 days later, on the 5th of February, we had Mr. Netanyahu as the Prime Minister of Israel visiting Delhi. He stayed here 3 days. Immediately 4 days later, Prime Minister Modi went to Jordan, Amman. From Jordan, he took a helicopter flight into Ramallah.
Yeah, I remember that. And there was a guard of honor given to him. There was a guard of honor.
People are all forgetting this. Ramallah, Palestinian Authority के साथ. उसके बाद वापस आए जॉर्डन से गए यूएई. वहां हिंदू टेम्पल अबू धाबी में उसकी फाउंडेशन ले की. Then he flew to Muscat and he had a state visit in Muscat and Oman. Came back. उसके 10 या 12 दिन बाद the president of Iran landed up in India. I attended the state dinner in Rashtrapati Bhavan. I still remember meeting Mr. Ajit Doval and sitting with him and speaking to him at that time. Met Prime Minister Modi in that dinner. It was wonderful. What a great honor it was to be invited to that dinner. the president of Iran went away, and a few days later, the King Abdullah of Jordan came back on his third state visit in the last 15 years, I think, to India. I've never seen Indian diplomacy as proactive as that in those 6 to 8 weeks. And it was all centered on West Asia, completely. And I've been drawing attention of Indian diplomats, and they told me we didn't look at it in this manner. Frankly saying, we ourselves didn't really look at it in this manner. But it is no doubt a huge, very energetic kind of a diplomacy was carried out, which embedded the Indian, interests as stakeholders in West Asia. And it's that which is being exploited by Mr. Modi to a great extent today for the benefit of India. So, मैं समझता हूं कि, you see, I like to take an example from Prime Minister Modi's very famous statement at Tashkent while speaking to Mr. Putin. This is not the season for war. ये ज़माना नहीं है लड़ाई का. लड़ाई के लिए ज़माना नहीं है ये. But that itself, perhaps we need to exploit that. And that has found a mention in the communique of G20 too.
Correct.
Right? I mean, the community must remember that is the relevance of that statement, that it could find a reference in the G20 communique too. So obviously, India is not a baby in this show. They got great stakes in this. We have got 9 million people in West Asia. We have $40 to $45 billion worth of remittances which come out of the Gulf and other areas in this place, right? We've got a diaspora all over. We have a diaspora in North Africa too. So the Indian diaspora is a very, very important entity. While we are withdrawing 18,000 of them, and under the current circumstances, many of them will obviously go back because they're all professionals. Lots of them are professionals, students, etc., who will go back and complete their courses and things like that there. So our stakes are huge. हमें इसके अंदर एंट्री करनी चाहिए, इनिशिएटिव लेना चाहिए. And I think the kind of standing Mr. Modi has in the international community today, a reference from him, a request from him, will probably make a huge difference. And it can be undertaken. This can be the beginning of future strategies. The Indo-US strategic partnership can look for such kind of initiatives coming from India instead of coming from the other big powers as such. So I think we should wait and watch a little bit, but start preparing ourselves. And we've got a wonderful set of diplomats, although I strongly feel under the current circumstances, we need a system of special envoys. And many of our experienced diplomats must be used as special envoys in this particular case as the one situation emerging in West Asia.
I think you put it out right, sir. We have to step forward when the heat reduces a bit. क्योंकि अभी सबका खून गर्म है. Let it reduce a bit, because ये जो problem है, इसका हल जल्दी नहीं होगा. You need a lot of patience to resolve this. Right. So I've been getting a lot of questions, and there's another question which, I'll put the question up so that we all are understand it. He says, "Thanks for your service. How can Bharat avoid Israel-like situation? Do you believe that it is inevitable that India will also have such attacks in future?" Right. Before you this thing, sir, you've been a co-commander on the line of control after all 15 Corps, where maximum infiltration also used to happen. Let me contextualize what General Bhatia, put across this thing. Then you could talk of it. What he said. सबको बताना चाहता हूँ, जनरल भाटिया जो हमारे डीजीएमओ रह चुके हैं, जो वहाँ 25 डिव जो राजौरी के इलाके में कमांड किया, उन्होंने ये एक हमें बताया 2 दिन पहले ही. In November, December 2007, Chief of IDF visited Rajouri/BG, and we briefed him at point 489, a tourist spot, as it's a good vantage point with a helipad, वगैरह वगैरह. Prior to briefing, I requested him to let us know as the counter-infiltration grid in Gaza. इसी के बारे में बात हुआ था. He detailed the infrastructure, technologies, ISR, communication, manning, and ROE. 7 layers, very impressive. Thereafter, we demonstrated our tactics, methodology along the fence, and briefed on the counter-infiltration grid. On the way back to the helipad, I was driving him in the gypsy. His wife was sitting behind. He told her, and I quote, "Darling, I think we need to replicate this in Israel." Right? And with, I think that's very apt, sir. And now, sir, in the light of this question and how people think that we could get surprised in that manner. Your views now, sir. Do you think Pakistan can rake up some nonsense of this kind?
This is a very apt question, and it's very apt to ask it to General Bhatia and to myself, both of us being postmates. Besides the fact
Yeah,
that
yeah.
he commanded 25 div and I commanded 19 div at the same
19.
time.
Yeah.
Both of us were across the Pir Panjal. We were commanding both the divisions. I have visited Israel, as General Bhatia has also visited Israel. I've gone to the Lebanese border, been to the Gaza border. I've seen much of the fence and the wall at that time, and seen many of these technologies which had been placed there. I wrote about this the other day in an article. One of the first observation one had. In Jammu, in Kashmir in particular, not so much in Jammu today. Jammu is weaker today. Kashmir is still very strong. We put up our fence. Most of the technologies that we put up on the fence, sensors, etc., hardly worked. I mean, they were there for good demonstration purposes and things like that. What the best was the very famous artillery equipment, HHTI, the handheld thermal imager, class equipment, force multiplier, the handheld thermal imager, right? It was a wonderful thing. The TIIOE, again, artillery equipment. Now, all these observation equipments of the artillery were in an improvised manner put on the fence along Kashmir, along both in Rajouri and in the Baramulla, Kupwara sectors, etc. They worked wonders. But they worked wonders why? While all this was networked, gridded, etc., the human resource element was very, very strong. What I noticed, and I told the Israelis when I went to them, I said, who controls this? Oh, this is controlled by so-and-so command post at so-and-so distance. What is the response you have? Oh, it will take so many minutes to get the response. Good response was very, very good. But the commitment, the committed human angle. You know, one of the things when the fence was completed on 1st of July 2004, one of the first things that General Widge came and told me, I remember as the Uri Brigade commander, was take ownership of the fence. This fence is yours. Tell every Jawan, ye mera 75 meter hai. This belongs to me. This belongs to India. It belongs to my division. It belongs to my brigade, and it belongs to me. Main iska malik. That when that ownership was taken, I'm telling you, you couldn't get a sausage across. एक चिड़िया परिंदा नहीं आ सकता था वहां से across it. But we also inculcated a belief in most of our soldiers that देखो बेटे ये जो है ना, this is not a foolproof system. इसमें तब भी लीकेजेस होंगे और इसके लिए हमको पीछे layers बनाने पड़ेंगे. The layers that the Israelis have made are technical layers. We made human.
We have
layers.
got human layers.
Human layers. इतने ज्यादा ट्रूप्स हमने एंगेज किए इसके अंदर लेयर टू लेयर के पीछे, जहां पर रिसेप्शन पार्टी टेररिस्ट के आने की सोचती थी कि हम आकर और रिसीव करेंगे टेररिस्ट ग्रुप को, 10-12 का ग्रुप आएगा, 2-3 टेररिस्ट होंगे जो उनको रिसीव करेंगे राजवार फॉरेस्ट में, उन टेररिस्ट को भी हमने डिस्प्लेस कर दिया. उनको पहले डिस्टर्ब करो ताकि जो टेररिस्ट अंदर आ रहे हैं वो सोच में नहीं पाएंगे कहां जाएंगे. I'm being a little too detailed on this, but let me tell you the long and short of it is कि इस तरह से हमने ये इन्फिल्ट्रेशन ग्रिड को बनाया, काउंटर इन्फिल्ट्रेशन किया, बहुत सक्सेसफुली किया, डिस्पाइट दैट लीकेजेस टुक प्लेस, राइट. बट टुडे टू बिलीव कि ये 100% फुल प्रूफ है और कि हमारा काउंटर इन्फिल्ट्रेशन ग्रिड ऐसा है जिसमें कोई एक परिंदा अब नहीं आ सकता है, दैट इज रॉन्ग. दैट वुड बी रॉन्ग. हुबरी जो इनके साथ हुआ है इजराइल के साथ, वही चीज अगर हमारे साथ हो गई. मैं याद दिलाता हूं लोगों को, 2011 में हाफिज सईद ने एक थ्रेट दी थी, मैं 500 टेररिस्ट जो हैं उसको मैं इन्फिल्ट्रेट करूंगा, 400 मर जाएं मगर 100 भी निकल जाएं भारत के अंदर तो कश्मीर के अंदर, उस वक्त कहा कश्मीर के अंदर तो हमारे लिए सक्सेस होगी. Now you see, this is a suicidal method, exactly what the Hamas has done just now. Virtually suicidal. And it can happen tomorrow. Someone can be inspired by this. Look here, you only need a leadership. You only need to plant an idea. After all, Kargil कैसे आया? Kargil का idea was because of the leadership of परवेज मुशर्रफ. 1987 में 87 में वो हार चुके थे 10 दफे जब उन्होंने कोशिश की थी हमारे वो अशोक पोस्ट पर हमला करने के लिए नॉर्दर्न ग्लेशियर में, तो वो हार चुके थे मगर दिमाग में बैठा हुआ था. वैसे ही कोई हारा हुआ कोई दुश्मन होगा जिसके दिमाग में बैठ गया है. He may come up and tomorrow decide, I can succeed. My strategy can succeed. I can train my troops to perfection. My special forces are far superior to the Indian special forces. जब ये चीजें दिमाग में किसी के आती हैं, तब खलबली मचती है. And then they can try these harebrained ideas like what the Hamas did just now.
Yeah. So, but personally, I know, and you also know, and I would like to tell everyone, it's not easy to do the same thing, repeat such a thing against India. Yeah, we have a disadvantage जो मैं बताना चाहता हूँ, क्योंकि hinterland में, because हमारा hinterland में, the terrorists have some support. That leads us to some other problems. हमारा problem is not the same like what is there across, the Gaza border. Was different. We have been able to tackle it very well. And that is why today you can hold a G20 meet in Kashmir and Srinagar especially. So we'll leave it at that. I think So last point I would like you to address today before we take on a few questions is India's evacuation capabilities. Because time and again we have displayed this, whether it was getting people back from Wuhan or from Yemen long back or from Ukraine or now from Israel. We have been doing it repeatedly. And this is a capability which no other country has had. Even China has not been able to evacuate. Doesn't this differentiate us from the rest? One. And doesn't it represent a huge capability? Which I think you must explain to everyone.
Absolutely. देखिए, मैं आज डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट मैनेजर हूं मोर देन अ कॉन्फ्लिक्ट मैनेजर. ठीक है. और मैं अपनी ऑडियंसेस को हर जगह जहां मैं डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट की बात करता हूं, I always explain there are only two domains in which all of government approach is required. One is war and the second is disaster. ठीक है. अब आप देखिए जितने इंस्टेंसेस ये है ना, evacuation of Indians from different situations abroad, all of them have been done through an all of government approach. It's not that the MEA has sat on it and done it alone. They have at the same time taken along the MOD along with them, the Army, the Air Force, the Navy. The Navy's played a huge role in Lebanon, if you remember, way back in 2006. Every service has played a role at some time or the other. And they've developed the capability, and most importantly, we have got experienced officers as our defense attaches in different capitals of the world. And this number is increasing, and the number should continuously increase because it only enhances military diplomacy. And ज़्यादातर अगर मैं आपकी ऑडियंस को बताना चाहता हूं, जो काबिलियत एक फौजी ऑफिसर आर्मी नेवी एयरफोर्स एज डिफेंस अटैचे लाता है टू अ मिशन एंड एन एम्बेसी, वो 10 डिप्लोमेट नहीं ला सकते हैं. आई एम सॉरी टू बी सेइंग इट लाइक दैट, बट
इट्स अ फैक्ट सर.
It's a trained thing. Now, the moment you see this gunner officer, I think in Saudi Arabia, जिसने ये पूरा evacuation सुदान का कराया था. He was I remember that stance of standing on top of a thing and speaking to an audience and saying, "Fikr mat kariye, hum aa gaye,
हम ले जाएंगे.
We have come and we will lead you back home." You see, it's that inspiration of that kind which makes a difference. And we select our DAs very, very careful. General Pankaj P. Shankar is also from the military secretary's branch. He knows it कि हम किस डेप्थ में जाते हैं अपने डिफेंस अटैचेस को सेलेक्ट करने के लिए. ऐसे इंस्पिरेशनल फिगर्स होते हैं ये सब, और यही करते हैं. और हमारी मिलिट्री डिप्लोमेसी ये भी है कि बहुत हद तक आजकल इस पर ज्यादा जोर पड़ गया है, ज्यादा दिया है. डिफेंस इंटेलिजेंस एजेंसी हमारी जो है आईडीएस के साथ, वो करती है इसको. ज्यादातर ये बढ़ाने के लिए हम करते हैं कि जितने लोग आपके कोर्सेज पर आते हैं, ये अलग अलग मुल्कों से आते हैं आपके पास, पीपल कम टू यू एंड डू ट्रेनिंग, पीरियड्स ऑफ ट्रेनिंग विद यू एटसेट्रा. वी मेक श्योर वी मेंटेन अ रिलेशनशिप विद देम. कल आप इजराइल के साथ हमारी army to army, Air Force to Air Force relationship is brilliant. Our officers have done courses there. अभी भी NDC में हमारे यहाँ एक इजरायली ब्रिगेडियर या कर्नल साहब होंगे जो कर रहे होंगे कोर्स यहाँ. वो वापस जाएंगे तो he will be a link with us forever. This is what military diplomacy is all about. So it helps. We have, I mean, this is one domain which India has taken to a great extent to the last. अगर इस तरह से हम हर चीज के ऊपर जोर देने लगे ना, our problems are going to be well behind us. But this is actually an exquisite example we have given to the rest of the world. And not only Indians, we have evacuated people from third countries, lots of other countries, from Nepal, from Sri Lanka, from Bangladesh, and things like that, and without any qualms about doing that.
Yeah, we've even evacuated Pakistanis from Ukraine, sir.
Yes, absolutely. I remember,
Right.
Jan Shankar, I remember just a year and a half ago, I was called upon by the Information and Broadcasting Ministry of the Union of India to make a virtual broadcast on advisory to students who are stuck in the war zone. तो
Okay.
उनको बताएं कि आपको क्या हिदायतें चाहिए. In a war zone, how should you take care and ensure safety of yourself and your belongings and people around you? I made up this and I put it out in the air at that particular time. You see, this is what I call an all-of-government approach. Information broadcasting का क्या इसमें role है? Otherwise, but thankfully, the secretary himself rang me up and told me, "Please, sir, come to Doordarshan and इसको कर दीजिए आप." Absolutely, I'm the happiest person to do that for my country.
I think, sir, जो आपने ये last बात बताया, it actually reinforces we need to start a series on disaster management and HADR. But then
Absolutely.
we'll do this as we go along because it's going to be an ongoing series, right? So before I take a few questions, I would like to tell everyone, सबको बताना चाहता हूँ, 17 तारीख को हम कासा का वेबिनार कर रहे हैं on the Hamas Israel war and the consequences, जिसमें जनरल हसनैन भी होंगे, उसके साथ साथ एम्बेसडर त्रिगुनायत होंगे और डॉक्टर माइकल रूबिन होंगे जो यूएसए से हमारे साथ जुड़ रहे हैं और वो उस प्रोग्राम को मैं मॉडरेट करूंगा. और 18 तारीख को जनरल राज शुक्ला के साथ हम ये एक रिव्यू लेंगे क्योंकि मेरे ख्याल में तब तक कुछ एक्शन शुरू हो गया होगा. आप लोगों को भी पता, टू गिव यू एन आइडिया एज टू व्हाट इज हैपनिंग एंड देन उसका परिणाम क्या होगा थोड़ा अंदाजा लगाएंगे उस वक्त तक, राइट? इफ नॉट, एंड विल कीप दिस, ये जारी रखेंगे विद our eminent officers, strategic personalities who have understood this war better than most others, right? Isliye do subscribe to Gunner Shot and keep coming back because you're going to have important coverage of this entire sequence for quite some time to come. And before I take on questions, I'd like to explain why am I taking on this thing, the Hamas-Israel war almost on a daily basis. Please understand, this is also a colonial legacy left over by the British, a manufactured legacy. Just the way they left a manufactured legacy between India and Pakistan. Agar aap dekhenge to from the previous century to this century, these are the two most, problematic legacies which really don't have a solution. And these will keep erupting. And unless we understand that the West Asian problem, probably we will not be able to handle our own India-Pakistan problem in the longer run. That is why I keep coming back. So, you have any view on this particular aspect, sir? You could say, otherwise I'll take questions.
No, I entirely agree. You see, I do a program, you have yourself seen it, called the Rise of Political Islam, if you remember. And in that, I ensure that I emphasize that this problem of radical and fundamentalist Islam has primarily risen in through the legacy areas, the British colonial legacy areas of West Asia and the colonial legacy areas of the South Asia, India. This is the two horns on which political Islam has risen. And that's why it's so important for us to know these two areas very well.
Yeah, we'll do this, sir. I think we need to revisit this whole thing, and I would like you to first speak on political Islam once again.
I'll do that.
Anytime
definitely.